The courtroom lights dimmed, a grainy VHS flickered, then froze on Diane Kelly standing over her dying father. "Let me speak to him. Alone," she said. Gasps rippled through the gallery as her mother, Marianne Kelly, watched without blinking. 30 years ago, Diane stole her mother's inheritance. Now Marianne had brought her own daughter, Olivia, to testify against her, and in the front row sat Diane's sister, the one who'd been declared dead. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Marianne Kelly sat hunched on the hard aluminum bleachers, the summer sun streaming through the gymnasium skylights and pooling in hot patches on her pressed navy dress. Around her, applause crackled and cameras flashed like tiny fireworks. The air smelled of carnations, sweat, and auditorium dust, the scent of other people's pride. And Marianne, 68, sat with her hands folded neatly over her purse as if she were part of the scenery. She didn't flinch when Olivia leaned in, voice flat and eyes darting. "Just sit quietly and don't embarrass me." The words struck with surgical precision. Not loud enough for anyone else to hear, just enough to shatter something sacred. Marianne didn't answer. She didn't need to. The silence between them was already screaming. Across the gym floor, Diane stood with her usual suburban poise, all crisp linen and curated laughter, chatting effortlessly with other parents. She held a program in one manicured hand, the other gesturing like she belonged to this life, newer, sleeker, free of the dust and sweat that had built the foundation beneath her heels. The Kelly name was still whispered around town, but now with a polished shine, Diane had rebranded church boards, wine fundraisers, PTA politics. Marianne looked at the crowd, then at the stage. Her eyes followed the polished banner hanging overhead, "Welcome to the Class of 2024 Commencement Ceremony, Onward and Upward," a tagline Diane probably helped write, and below it the same crest she once carved into her father's fence post with a penknife 50 years ago. They'd kept the emblem, but they'd paved over everything else. She glanced down at the program. Olivia Grace Kelly, class historian. Her name, front and center. And yet the girl next to her, nervous, fidgeting, looked like she wanted to vanish. Olivia's long auburn hair hung loose to one side, framing her sharp profile as she clutched her speech notes and tapped her foot in a staccato rhythm against the bleacher metal. Marianne's eyes narrowed. It wasn't stage fright. It was shame. Her granddaughter, ashamed of her. The ache didn't come all at once. It pressed in slowly, like a bruise forming under the skin of memory. Marianne thought of the night everything started slipping. She had worn black that evening, thinking it was what you did when your father passed. Diane hadn't shed a tear, just handed her a beige envelope and said, "Daddy's will wasn't found. The estate's been absorbed through the joint trust." The words didn't make sense then. They never really had. "Don't make this harder than it has to be, Mom," Diane had added, already dialing the realtor. Marianne blinked back to the present. The principal was at the podium now, listing awards, scholarships, moments of pride. The crowd applauded at all the right times, trained like a choir. Then the microphone crackled again. "And now, before we bring up our class historian," the principal beamed, "we'd like to invite an honored family alumna whose family history has deep roots in this very land, to say a few words." A ripple of confusion swept the stage. Olivia stiffened. Her mouth opened slightly. Marianne didn't wait. She stood slowly, smoothing the lines in her dress, each step deliberate. Her heels clicked faintly against the bleacher floor as she descended. Her heart wasn't racing. It was steady, like it had been waiting for this moment longer than she realized. The gymnasium murmured, then hushed. Diane's smile dropped. Olivia sat frozen, her fingers white-knuckling the folded speech in her lap. Marianne reached the aisle and walked calmly toward the front. The stage light caught the edge of her silver hair as she approached the mic. A student in a black robe whispered, "Who is she?" Someone answered, "That's Olivia's grandma, I think." Another, "Didn't her family own all this land?" Olivia's face flushed red. Marianne stepped up to the podium, placed her hands gently on either side, and looked out across the sea of young, expectant faces. Gasps ripple through the gym as Marianne walks calmly toward the microphone. Marianne adjusted the mic with steady hands. It squealed briefly before falling silent. The hush in the gymnasium deepened. A few claps, polite and unsure, fluttered in the back row. "Good afternoon," she began, voice clear and measured, with a grace that didn't ask for permission. "To the class of 2024, congratulations. You've done something truly remarkable." The audience exhaled, relieved. For a second, it looked like they were getting the usual grandmotherly speech, something nostalgic, safe. "But before we move forward," Marianne continued, her tone shifting like steel beneath velvet, "I'd like to share a story, one not found in your textbooks. It's about what happens when truth gets paved over by greed, and how sometimes silence lets it happen." A rustle passed through the crowd, like wind before a storm. Olivia's eyes widened. She stopped breathing. Marianne's gaze flicked toward her daughter. 30 years ago, I buried my father and was told there was no will, no final words, no inheritance, just a handshake agreement, one that left everything to my sister. Everything, including this land, the very ground you're sitting on now." Diane's smile faltered. Her fingers clenched the edge of her seat like she could hold the moment still. "I was told there was nothing for me," Marianne went on, voice calm and sharpened. "No house, no pasture, not even the deed to the swing set I built with my father the summer I turned 11. Olivia sank into her chair, barely blinking. Around her, students began nudging each other. A few lifted phones, recording. Marianne paused just long enough to let the weight settle. This wasn't a family decision. This was theft, committed not with guns or threats, but with signatures. Land stolen by paper, not fire. And the ink dried long before I had a chance to speak. Diane sat frozen, lips tight, eyes darting toward the principal and then the exits. A teacher leaned toward the stage as if considering whether to interrupt. Marianne didn't stop. "I remember the morning after the funeral. Diane wore my mother's pearls and served coffee like she'd already claimed the throne. And then she said it, as cold as a bank vault. 'There's nothing left for you, Marianne. It's all handled.'" Whispers rippled across the bleachers. Some students turned to look at Diane. Others watched Marianne like she was unfolding a movie scene in real time. "She didn't do it alone," Marianne said, now addressing the back wall like she could see ghosts there. "There was a man, a banker, a man she married 2 months later. He filed everything. He made it official. He helped rewrite a legacy." The gym fell into a stunned quiet. The hum of the air conditioning seemed louder. Even the tassels on the graduates' caps seemed to still. Diane sat stiff, skin pale beneath her powder foundation. Olivia looked like she might cry, or run. A teacher near the podium whispered, "Should we cut the mic?" Another replied, "Let her finish. She's not naming students." Marianne stood taller. "None of this is about revenge," she said, voice trembling just slightly now. "It's about clarity, about standing where your ancestors once stood and not pretending someone else earned the right to be here." She looked directly at Olivia. Her expression softened, just for a breath. Then she turned toward the audience again. "This isn't a call for sympathy," she said. "It's a reminder that history doesn't belong to the loudest. It belongs to the ones who survive." A buzz cut through the silence. Olivia's phone vibrated in her lap. "Yo, your grandma's going off. She's a legend. It was her boyfriend, Carter." She stared at the message, then at her grandmother, who hadn't even blinked. Marianne looked toward Diane, their eyes locking across the crowded room. Her voice dropped into something intimate, lethal. "You wanted silence," she said, letting the words hang. Then she smiled. "You'll get fire instead." The sun blazed down on the high school parking lot, turning asphalt into a griddle. Olivia's graduation cap was clutched in her hand, her heels clacking against pavement as she caught up to Diane, who stomped toward the Lexus with a white-knuckled grip on her purse and rage in her stride. "Mom, stop!" Olivia called out, voice sharp and shaking. Diane whirled around so fast, her pearl earring snapped loose and hit the ground. "Are you happy now?" she hissed, her voice loud enough for the gathering parents and students to hear. "That woman is senile. She ambushed your graduation with delusions and lies." "She didn't sound delusional," Olivia snapped, catching up. "She sounded furious, and sure, she is furious, because she lives in a fantasy world where she's still the heir to something that doesn't exist." Diane's smile returned, brittle and wide. "Now get in the car before she finds a way to ruin your prom too." But Olivia didn't move. Did she make all of it up? The land, the will, Grandpa's wishes? Diane's expression hardened like stone beneath frosting. "Your grandmother has always needed an audience. This is just another play, and I'm done playing along." A few feet away, two students whispered to each other, phones still pointed their way. One murmured, "Yo, that's the woman her grandma dragged in the speech." Inside the car, Diane's fingers trembled as she jammed the keys into the ignition. Olivia stood outside, stunned, as her mother peeled off with a screech of rubber, leaving her standing in the rising heat. Later that night, in the hushed quiet of her small rental cottage, Marianne pulled down a dusty wooden box from the top of her bedroom closet. Her fingers lingered on the etched initials, MK. She set it on the bed and opened it slowly, revealing a stack of brittle envelopes, yellowed newspaper clippings, and a single sealed document marked Confidential Estate Hearing 1993. Near the bottom, beneath court correspondence and a faded funeral program, lay a cream envelope addressed in tight cursive. "To MK, in case I didn't make it clear, Dad." Marianne unfolded the letter with practiced hands. Her father's handwriting, slanted and deliberate, filled the page. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Diane has always been clever, but I underestimated her ambition. I meant to make things right, but the day got away from me. If something happens, know this. The second draft exists. It reflects what I truly wanted. Don't let her erase you." A fresh ache bloomed in Marianne's chest. She pressed the paper to her lips and exhaled slow. Then she reached for the flip phone tucked into the back of her drawer. Its battery groaned to life. She scrolled to a contact labeled E. Ellison, Barn, and hit call. It rang twice. Then a gravel-coated voice answered. "This line still works?" "It's Marianne," she said quietly. "I need to talk. About the will." A pause. Then, "You shouldn't be calling me. And yet here I am." The silence that followed didn't sound like rejection. It sounded like agreement. Across town, Diane was just stepping out of her shower when her phone buzzed 5 times in rapid succession. She ignored it, until her work phone lit up with a text from one of her board contacts. "You should see this." She tapped the link. A TikTok screen opened. "Graduation mic drop. Grandma airs family secrets during speech." The view count climbed in real time. 197,322, 199,908, 201,113. The video showed Marianne gripping the mic with a righteous calm. The camera panned briefly to Diane in the crowd, her face mid-contortion. Diane's stomach dropped like a failing elevator. Her name was out there now, and her past had teeth. Back at her cottage, Marianne sat by the open window, her father's letter resting on the table beside a mug of black tea. Crickets sang outside. The scent of rain-dampened earth filtered in. She opened her laptop, clicked the link Olivia had sent her hours earlier, and watched the clip for the first time. She saw herself on screen, strong, unwavering. Truth poured from her lips like it had waited decades to be uncorked. Marianne leaned forward, stared at her reflection in the darkened monitor, and whispered, "If this goes viral, she can't bury me again." The wind cut across the vacant soccer field like it was trying to erase memory. Marianne Kelly stood at the chain-link fence, the soles of her shoes pressed into the brittle gravel where her childhood porch used to creak. The air smelled of fresh mulch and Gatorade, but beneath the polished artifice, there lingered something sour and unfinished. Regret had a scent, and she could smell it rising from the soil. She followed the narrow maintenance trail behind the athletic shed, ducking under branches and crunching over pine needles that had gathered like secrets in the corners of forgotten places. There, half swallowed by overgrown vines and rusted ivy hooks, stood the last remnant of the past. The old shed. Its wood siding bowed inward like a rib cage after collapse. The lock was gone. The door groaned on its hinges, protesting her return. Inside, sunlight filtered through cracks. Dust swirled like ghosts. Marianne's cane tapped gently against the rotting floorboards. With a grunt, she knelt at the edge of an old rug and peeled it back. Her fingers brushed against warped floorboards and something solid beneath. Nails rusted to flakes, wood splintering at her touch. After a minute of prying, the boards gave way. She reached into the dark space below and pulled up a canvas-bound folder, the corners soft with water damage. Faded handwriting read, "Secondary will, not filed." Her hands trembled, but not with age, with memory, with fury. She flipped through brittle pages until she found it. A legal draft, partially scorched along the edge as if someone had tried to erase its contents with fire and nerve. The draft was dated 2 weeks after her father's official will, and it stated clearly the estate was to be divided evenly between Marianne Kelly and Diane Kelly Madsen. But the signature page was gone. Her heart pounded as she reached deeper into the crawl space. Nestled inside a plastic lunchbox, she found something almost laughable in its simplicity: a cassette tape labeled in red ink. July 3, 1993, final statement. Her father's handwriting. The J's still curved, the 9s still stiff. Marianne stared at it for a long beat. Then she closed the shed door behind her and began the slow walk back toward her car, one foot steady in front of the other. At the thrift store on Market Street, a teenager in a smock helped her find an old Sony tape player. "You sure this works?" she asked. "Tested it myself. Plays like a time machine," the boy said with a shrug. Marianne nodded once. Time machine. That's exactly what she needed. Back in her living room, she sat alone with the tape recorder perched on the coffee table. Her hands moved slowly, reverently, as she slid the cassette into place and pressed play. Static hissed. Then her father's voice crackled through the speakers, tired, gravelly, and unmistakably shaken. "If you're hearing this, I didn't get the chance to make it official." Pause. "I drafted the new will, equal shares. Marianne deserves what she built with me, but Diane, she's not waiting for me to die. She's helping it along." Marianne's fingers clenched the edge of the armrest. The sound of her father's breath faltering made her chest seize. She pressured the notary. "I didn't trust her husband from the start. I don't know what they're planning, but I know I won't be here to stop it. I just hope someone will." Click. That was all. The tape stopped. Silence bloomed. She sat motionless for a full minute. Then she moved with purpose. First, she digitized the audio using an old laptop and a line-in jack. Then she uploaded it to an encrypted folder. Finally, she created an anonymous email address and sent the file to a local journalist she remembered from a years ago expose on land fraud, Trevor Sloan, WCF News. In the body of the email, she wrote only one line: "If you care about the truth, listen to this. Then call me." She leaned back in her chair, the room dark except for the amber hue of the desk lamp. Outside, the wind had died. Something else, something quieter, more dangerous, had taken its place. The reporter responds with one line: "If this is real, I want the whole story." The polished granite countertops caught the reflection of Diane's clenched jaw. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad, paused, then refreshed the browser again. The view count had jumped by another 6,000. The clip of her mother's microphone ambush had now gone viral. Not just small-town viral, national. A few scrolls down, someone had captioned it, "Grandma just dropped a will-shaped nuke at graduation." She slammed the laptop shut so hard a glass rattled off the counter and cracked on the tile. "This is elder confusion," she hissed aloud to no one. "She doesn't even know what year it is." Her phone rang. Pastor Fields, then a county councilwoman, then her friend Lynn from the Women's Auxiliary Board, all asking the same things. "Is your mother okay? Should we be worried? Do you want us to organize support?" By noon, she had orchestrated a full narrative reset. The family was concerned. Marianne had always been eccentric. They were planning a small gathering to address the situation with love and concern. Not a trap, Diane told herself, just a course correction. She called Marianne that afternoon, syrup in her voice. "Why don't you come over tomorrow? Just us. Talk through all this noise." "Of course," Marianne said lightly. "I'll bring dessert." But she brought something else. The next day, the light in Diane's kitchen felt too bright, too curated, a stage more than a home. Diane wore soft blue. Olivia sat at the table, arms crossed, silent. Two of Diane's church friends lingered in the living room, pretending to browse throw pillows. "Mother," Diane began, "this is a safe space. We love you, but you've clearly—" Marianne pulled a flash drive from her coat pocket and slid it across the table. "What's this?" Diane asked, voice clipped. "My backup plan," Marianne said. "It's all digitized now. Audio of Dad's last confession, scanned drafts of the second will, and notarized statements, names you'll remember." "Mom, stop this." Diane's hands trembled, but her voice tried to hold shape. "You're making a public spectacle. For what? A fantasy?" Olivia turned. "A fantasy? Is that what this is?" Diane's mask began to slip. "She's confused, honey. She's always thought—" Marianne clicked her phone and played a short clip from the audio. "I was manipulated. I want this fixed." The voice was unmistakably their father's. It cracked through the kitchen like thunder. Olivia stood slowly. "That's Grandpa. That's his voice." Diane's eyes darted. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but this time no mask remained. "You want to destroy everything your grandfather built?" She snapped at Marianne. "For what? Your ego?" "For the truth," Marianne replied calmly. "Get out!" Diane spat. "Get out!" Olivia stepped between them. "Did you forge the signature?" Diane didn't hesitate. She lifted her hand and slapped her daughter. The room froze. Olivia didn't cry. She just looked at her mother like she was seeing her for the first time. "Thank you," she whispered. "Now I know." Marianne didn't flinch. She picked up her purse, walked to the door, and paused just long enough to hand Olivia a sealed envelope. On it, in black ink, "Witness list." No words, just that. She walked out as Diane's voice cracked into furious sobs behind her. That night, in her bedroom lit only by the glow of a string lamp, Olivia sat cross-legged on her bed. She tore the envelope open. Inside was a single sheet, 7 names. Typed. One stood out, the last name on the list, circled in ink. Ellison Barrett, barn caretaker, 1993. Status: alive. The knock echoed like bones hitting hollow wood. Cold wind whispered through the gap in the porch slats as Marianne stood alone, clutching a canvas bag under her arm. Weeds curled up the aluminum siding of the trailer. A tin mailbox hung crooked, rust bleeding into the paint like dried blood. Then, the sound of feet. Slow. Reluctant. The door creaked open. A thin, older man with a gray beard and oil-stained flannel shirt stood in the frame. His eyes, though clouded with time, sharpened when they landed on her. "Marianne?" he rasped. She nodded, unable to trust her voice. "I thought you were dead," he muttered, "or gave up like the rest." "No," she said softly. "But I need to ask about that night." Ellison Barrett stepped aside, motioning her in. The trailer smelled faintly of tobacco and cedarwood, overlaid with the metallic scent of rust and something old, like secrets that had never left the room. They sat opposite each other at a chipped formica table. He poured her a glass of lukewarm well water, which she didn't touch. "I never forgot," he said. "Still dream about it sometimes." "July 3rd, she said. "You were there. The day my father finalized the second will." He nodded slowly. "I was there. He dictated it to me. Couldn't hold a pen steady by then. I wrote it down as he said it, word for word. Said he didn't trust Diane." Marianne reached into her bag and laid down a burnt-edged document protector containing the half-destroyed draft from the shed. "This matches?" He studied the charred edges, then reached under the table. From a thin slot in the floorboard, he lifted out a leather-bound journal. The pages yellowed, but intact. "I kept the copy," he whispered. "Didn't know if I'd ever need it, but I signed it, right here." He pointed to the corner, and so did he. The original was with him when he died. Marianne flipped carefully through the journal. The handwriting matched. The date, July 3, 1993. The line, split evenly between my daughters. Marianne is to receive the house and land. Diane, the liquid assets. Then she spotted something else. Another entry. Diane came today. She wasn't invited. I told her to leave. She said she already had plans in motion. I fear what she's capable of. Marianne looked up, her heart thudding. She came that night? Ellison exhaled sharply, nodded, tried to scare me, offered me $5,000 to say I never saw a second will, said if I didn't help her I'd regret it. His voice dropped lower. The next week someone slashed my tires. My dog was poisoned. I never spoke about it again. Marianne's hand trembled on the journal. Would you testify? He hesitated. If my name goes public, I'm dead meat. We'll keep you protected until trial, she said. You'd be saving everything he tried to do right. He stared at her, then gave the smallest of nods. But I want it encrypted, backed up. If anything happens to me, it goes public. Marianne spent the rest of the afternoon scanning the pages at a nearby public library. The faded ink glowed faintly on the screen, time-stamped and date-locked. She uploaded it to a secure cloud server and handed Ellison a hard copy. Thank you, she whispered. He would have wanted this. That night, she returned to her house, the porch light flickering. The mailbox, once latched shut, now hung open like a gaping mouth. Inside, a single sheet of paper fluttered in the wind. No envelope, no stamp, just a sentence, scrawled in thick black ink. You really want war? And at the bottom, barely legible in red pencil, you forgot what else she gave him. Look closer. July 4th, meds. The fluorescent lights above buzzed like a swarm. Diane sat motionless at the long, glass-topped conference table, her fingers laced tightly in front of her. Her lipstick was smudged, and the corner of her right eye twitched. Barely, but enough for the board to notice. 4 senior executives sat across from her. No one reached for the coffee. Until we get clarity on these allegations, said Patricia Halston, the VP of Ethics and Compliance, choosing her words like stepping through broken glass. We're placing you on temporary leave. Diane didn't blink. You've known me 18 years. Patricia glanced at the folder in front of her. And I've also never seen 3 anonymous complaints filed within 48 hours, Diane. And then there's the video, muttered one board member under his breath. Diane's jaw set. That was taken out of context. She's unstable. Then why? Patricia asked softly. Does the file mention potential probate fraud from 1993? And a caretaker who says he was paid to disappear? Diane leaned forward, icy calm. This is a smear campaign by a confused old woman looking to rewrite the past. But even as she said it, her voice cracked. And the eyes around the table knew what cracks meant. Something was leaking. She stormed out of the building and into the back seat of a black SUV. A young man in a slim suit awaited her inside, laptop already open. You hired us for optics, he said without preamble. So here's the strategy. We paint your mother as a deeply troubled senior dealing with dementia-related memory gaps. We put out a curated statement of compassion and regret. No, Diane snapped. We paint her as obsessed, vindictive. She was always like this. Ask anyone from my church circle. She's unstable. He nodded. That works too. But you'll need a visual, something soft, family-centric. I'll set up an intervention, Diane muttered. Bring her in under the pretense of healing. Make it look like I tried. Meanwhile, Olivia sat in her dorm's study lounge, phone pressed between her shoulder and cheek as she scrolled. She's unspooling, she whispered. Grandma, that clip's been shared over 800,000 times. Someone posted a side-by-side of the land deed and your dad's obituary. Reddit's running wild. Marianne's voice came steady across the line. I found a legal clinic willing to look at the case. Pro bono. They think we have grounds to petition the court to reopen the estate. Olivia hesitated. She's going to lose her mind if she finds out I'm helping you. She already lost it, Marianne replied. You're just pulling off the mask. Later that afternoon, Diane discovered Olivia had visited Marianne again. Her response was swift and merciless. "You're cutting yourself off," Diane hissed over dinner. "From this family, from everything we've sacrificed for you." "You mean everything you took from her?" Olivia shot back, trying to keep her voice steady. Diane's hand trembled as she reached for her wine. "Say one more word and I'll pull your tuition. See how far Grandma's land gets you then." Olivia rose from the table silently. She didn't cry. Not until she was in the safety of her car, texting Marianne with fingers that shook. "Olivia, I want to testify." That night, rain slicked the dorm parking lot in ribbons of silver. Olivia approached her car under a flickering overhead light, balancing her books. The tires sagged, slashed clean, 2 on each side. A sheet of lined notebook paper was wedged beneath the wiper blade. Just one sentence scrawled in jagged red ink: "Blood is blood." Her breath caught. Somewhere behind her, a door slammed shut. She didn't turn around. The building smelled like forgotten paper and lemon-scented floor polish. Fluorescent lights flickered above Marianne as she stepped up to the records counter with a manila folder tucked tightly under one arm, her gloves leaving faint imprints on the laminate surface. She adjusted her reading glasses, eyes scanning the wall of framed clerical portraits, none of them smiling. "I need probate files from July 1993, she said, voice flat. "Estate of Thomas W. Kelly." The clerk, a girl who looked no older than Olivia, tapped the keys lazily before disappearing into the back. Marianne exhaled slowly, her jaw clenched. She didn't come here hoping for miracles. She came for mistakes. What returned was a thin file, too thin. She flipped through it carefully, then paused. Page 3, the initial estate transfer form, was missing the timestamp. Page 5 listed initials that didn't match any known court official. And the final transfer document? Dated July 2nd, not July 3rd, the day her father had signed the revised version of the will, per Ellison's journal. Her hands trembled. "Who notarized this?" she muttered, pointing at the stamp. "Margaret Sloane, Notary Public." The girl shrugged. "You'd have to check licensing records, but we've had a few weird name mismatches from that era. Software migration, they say." Marianne didn't believe in ghosts, but she believed in buried evidence. 2 hours later, she sat across from a retired probate clerk named Linda Gates, sipping weak tea on a shaded porch in the outskirts of town. "Sloane?" Linda said, squinting at the file. "Nope, never licensed in North Carolina. I'd remember. She'd have had to sign the ledger every week." "Then why is she listed here?" Marianne asked, voice brittle. Linda gave her a sad smile. "Because someone with influence told us not to ask. I was a junior back then. They told me, don't flag it, don't speak of it, don't touch it." "And you didn't?" Marianne asked. "I had 2 kids under 5 and a mortgage I couldn't afford." Linda's voice dropped. "I'm sorry, Marianne. We failed you." Meanwhile, Olivia sat cross-legged on her dorm bed, poring over a stack of tax returns and insurance forms. Her lamp cast a yellow pool of light across the pile, and then she saw it. A scribbled note in the corner of an old 1992 W-2, deposit box, RFD Bank, Branch 9. She didn't recognize the bank, but a Google search revealed its rebranding into First South National. 30 minutes later, she texted her grandmother, "Meet me at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Bring ID. It's time." The box was musty, filled with brittle envelopes and one photo sealed in a Ziploc. The image showed the family, Thomas, Diane, Marianne, and a younger Olivia. But on the back, scrawled in black ink, were 5 haunting words. He knew. She did it anyway. Marianne traced the ink with her thumb. "My father was trying to tell someone." "And someone tried to erase it," Olivia whispered. That night, Marianne sat in the dim light of her den and dialed a number she had sworn never to call again. Diane answered on the 3rd ring. "You've got 30 seconds, Diane barked. "I have a copy of the unsigned second will. I have Ellison's journal. I have proof the notary didn't exist. I have the photo. I can go to the press tomorrow." A pause. Then Diane's voice came low and sharp, like a blade dragging over ice. "Then do it. You want war? Make it public. But I won't lose. Not this time." Click. Later that night, Marianne's inbox pinged with a new email from a masked address. No.reply at mirrorarchive.net. Subject line, "You forgot one document, and I have it." Attached was a single sentence, "Meet me alone, or everything burns." The frame wobbled. Static crackled across the screen. For a second, Olivia thought it might be blank. Then a figure appeared, hunched, gray-skinned, eyes still clear, her great-grandfather, her mother's grandfather, Mary Ann's father. His voice was raspy but steady, the words deliberate, recorded in the solemn quiet of what looked like a hospital room. "If this is being seen," he said, "then something has gone terribly wrong." Olivia froze, heart pounding. Her roommate stirred behind her, but she didn't hear a word. She leaned in, the earbuds pressing harder. The video continued. "I'm changing my will. Not for lack of love, but because I see the pattern now. Diane, she's become manipulative, strategic. I trusted her once. I should have confronted her years ago." A muffled knock interrupted the recording. And then, unbelievably, the door opened. Diane stepped into frame. "Dad," she said, "can I have a moment alone with you?" He turned toward her, his eyes clouding not with affection, but something close to fear. The video froze, then fuzzed. When it returned, the frame was empty. No aide, no Diane. Just silence and a wheelchair facing the window. Olivia ripped out the earbuds, breath shallow. Mary Ann sat across town at her kitchen table, the flash drive still warm from the USB port. She watched the same footage, fists clenched against the table's edge. The man behind the camera, the aide, was Joel Harper. She hadn't seen his face in nearly 3 decades. Joel had been assigned by the estate attorney to help her father document his intentions in those final days. And then 1 week after the probate ruling, he'd disappeared. No resignation, no trace. Just gone. Mary Ann stood pacing the room. She copied the video onto 2 separate encrypted drives and placed one into her fireproof lockbox. Then she sent it, along with a carefully worded summary and the original date of the recording, to her legal team and to one more recipient, newsdesk@ncstatebulletin.org. She hit send. Across campus, Olivia was already preparing for the worst. She uploaded a zip file labeled "Only if we go dark" to a private cloud drop. Inside, every court letter, every scanned copy of Ellison's journal, the photo, the journal entries, and now, the video. She encrypted it, set it on a 24-hour auto-release schedule, and created a secure email to hold the key. She didn't tell her mother. She didn't even tell her best friend. But she texted her grandmother, "If they come for either of us, the world sees it all. I promise." Hours later, Mary Ann's phone buzzed, a number she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Kelly?" The voice was firm. "This is Whitney over at NC State Bulletin. We've reviewed the video. We've had our forensics team confirm the footage is consistent with known VHS camera models from the early 90s. It's real." Mary Ann sat down slowly. "We want to run it," Whitney continued. "Prime time, 7 o'clock tonight." A long pause. "It's your call." Mary Ann didn't answer right away. She glanced toward the window where the sun was starting to dip, casting long golden slats across the floor. She felt the moment pressing against her like gravity. She had chased ghosts, collected fragments, been dismissed and degraded for 30 years. She had enough now to tip the world back upright, or burn the whole thing. Down trying. Then she heard the voice again. Not from the phone, but from memory. She wants everything. Her father, her past, her proof. The footage rolled in silence first, the grainy hum of analog tape, the dated tint of 1993 washing across flat screens and phone screens everywhere. Mary Ann's father appeared, frail in a hospital bed but eyes full of conviction, as his voice broke through the broadcast. "I want to change my will. I no longer trust Diane to act in the best interests of this family." Mary Ann sat stone still in her living room, Olivia beside her, hand gripping hers like it was the only thing tethering her to the earth. On screen, the camera flickered. Diane stepped into the frame, interrupting the statement, asking to be alone. Then the footage cut to black. The news anchor came back on with one sentence. "This raises serious legal questions about the legitimacy of the original probate ruling." Within an hour, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube detonated. Justice for Marianne trended across every major platform. Clips of the broadcast were clipped, remixed, and subtitled in real time. TikTok teens reenacted the VHS moment like a soap opera. Reddit dug up property sales records from the last 30 years, tracing exactly how Diane flipped every asset she inherited. By midnight, Marianne's phone buzzed nonstop. Messages poured in, not just from strangers but from former neighbors, churchgoers, and even long-lost cousins. "I always knew something was off," one message read. "You weren't the one who disappeared. Diane made you vanish." Diane, meanwhile, stood behind a lectern flanked by 2 attorneys. The press conference had been hastily assembled, the backdrop barely hanging straight. Her lipstick was smudged, her blouse wrinkled, her eyes darted like a cornered animal's. "This is a digital manipulation," she said, voice strained. "Selective editing, possibly even AI fabrication. My mother is confused and now malicious." The reporters didn't nod, they scribbled. One held up a phone, recording everything. An hour later, Olivia posted to her Instagram story. A plain black screen with white text. "My mother isn't confused. She's dangerous. She lied to all of us. I believe my grandmother." Then she posted a second slide, a photo of Marianne holding her father's cassette tape. The caption read, "The truth was never lost. It was just buried." That post alone got over 80,000 likes by morning. The legal petition was filed before dawn. Marianne's nonprofit legal team, spearheaded by a seasoned probate litigator named Lainey Ramos, submitted a formal motion to unseal and reopen the 1993 estate case, citing the newly discovered video, journal entries, fraudulent notary activity, and Ellison's willingness to testify under protection. Attached was an affidavit from a whistleblower, anonymous, typed, clean, but damning. The whistleblower had worked briefly for Diane's legal team 30 years ago. The memo outlined how Diane's husband funneled payments through a shell account, how Diane instructed them to handle the unsigned second will, and how internal memos referenced Judge Whitmer's gambling problem being neutralized. Lainey printed the document 3 times, one for the court, one for Marianne, and one for the press. By lunchtime, protest signs began appearing near City Hall and outside Diane's corporate building. One read, "She deserves her land back." Another, "Your secrets are showing, Diane." Even the local coffee shop added a chalkboard joke, "Today's special, Diane's bitter blend." Good Morning America called Olivia. So did The View. She declined both, but she agreed to a smaller local morning show, Wake Up Tri-County, where the host promised a fair, respectful platform. "I don't need to go viral," she told Marianne. "I just want people to know the truth." Marianne smiled, tucking a loose curl behind Olivia's ear. "You already made it impossible for them to ignore." That night, a knock at Marianne's door. It's a court courier. He hands her 2 envelopes, one for her, one for Olivia. Restraining orders, filed by Diane Kelly, alleging harassment, defamation, and unlawful psychological coercion. Stamped urgent. The war just went legal. The moment the double doors creaked open, 1,000 clicks of cameras followed like gunfire. Marianne didn't flinch. Her shoes, low, black leather, polished to a mirror's edge, clicked steadily across the courtroom floor. Olivia, in a soft charcoal blazer, stayed just behind her, clutching a folder of evidence like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Rows of seats were jammed with reporters, sketch artists, law students, and even retirees from the neighborhood. The trial of Marianne Kelly versus Diane Kelly had officially become a civic obsession. The bailiff called, "All rise," and the buzz died down to a low, taut breath as Judge Hartwell entered. Diane was already seated at the defense table, flanqued by 2 suited attorneys and 1 PR handler disguised as a paralegal. Her face was painted with composure, but her eyes twitched every time Olivia looked her way. The defense opened first. "Ladies and gentlemen," Diane's lead counsel began, pacing slowly. "This case is not about truth, it's about perception, about a grieving elderly woman who, unfortunately, has confused her longing for justice with fact. We are sympathetic to Mrs. Kelly's pain, But we ask the court to separate memory from law. Marianne sat still. She didn't blink, but her fingers gripped the edge of the table, pale at the knuckles. The attorney continued, suggesting Marianne had suffered cognitive decline and was influenced by social media fame and revisionist history. They painted her as a relic of a bygone era, clinging to ghosts. Then Lainey Ramos stood. In heels and a gray sheath dress, she glided to the center and placed a single USB drive on the evidence table. "No theatrics," she said. "Just facts. The ones Diane Kelly worked very hard to bury." She clicked a remote. The courtroom dimmed, the screen above flickered, and there it was, Marianne's father, trembling but defiant on a VHS tape. "I don't trust Diane," his voice said. "I want Marianne to have what's hers." Gasps, audible gasps. Even the court stenographer paused before catching up. The screen then froze on the moment Diane entered the frame, lips pursed, whispering to her father, "Let me have a moment alone with Dad." The room shifted. Lainey followed the video with a line of documents. Scanned pages of Ellison's journal, time-stamped banking records, checks routed through shell corporations traced to Diane's husband. Each piece landed like a slow drumbeat. "Your Honor," Lainey said, voice clear, "this is not just a case of stolen inheritance. This is generational theft, fraud, and manipulation carried out with surgical precision, and until now, silence." Judge Hartwell nodded. "Call your first witness." Olivia stood. She walked to the stand, hands trembling slightly, then swore in. Her voice cracked once, but her eyes never left her mother's. "I grew up thinking my grandmother was unstable," she said. "That's what my mother told me. That she was dramatic, forgetful, bitter. I believed it." She paused, swallowing. "But it wasn't true." She was silenced, and now I know why. She recounted nights she overheard Diane whispering on the phone, calling lawyers, hiding documents. Her voice wavered only when she said, "I feel like I inherited her lies more than her love." When she stepped down, Diane finally spoke, only with her eyes. Fury burned through her mascara as Olivia passed, but her daughter didn't even flinch. Then came Ellison. The courtroom doors opened again, and a hushed murmur rolled through the seats. He walked with a cane, shoulders hunched, but his jaw set like a man who'd been waiting 30 years to speak. "I was there when the second will was drafted," he said, gravel in his throat. "I heard it. I saw it. He pointed slowly, deliberately. "Came that night. Said it wasn't needed. Told me to forget it." The court was dead silent. "And she paid me. Told me to disappear. When I didn't, my trailer was trashed. My dog was poisoned. I still kept my mouth shut." He looked straight at Marianne. "But she never stopped fighting. So here I am." Judge Hartwell leaned forward. "Is it your sworn testimony that the second will existed and that Ms. Diane Kelly acted to suppress it?" "Yes, sir." On record, a pause, long enough for tension to grow legs and pace the room. Then, "This court will enter the second will into evidence." Diane's attorneys exploded in whispers. Judge Hartwell raised a hand. "Furthermore, due to the significant questions of fraud, forgery, and obstruction, this court is pausing all civil proceedings until a criminal review is complete." He looked over his glasses at Diane, then to the bailiff. "Secure all related documents. We're calling for a review of the entire 1993 probate ruling and possible fraud charges to follow." The morning sun sliced through the bare oaks like judgment, cold and deliberate. Marianne stood by her father's headstone, one hand pressed to the granite, the other gripping an envelope stamped with the seal of the state court. Olivia stood beside her, silent, the grass damp under their shoes, wind brushing their hair back like unseen fingers flipping through a family album. "I thought it'd feel like winning," Marianne murmured. "But it just feels like digging." The decision had come at 9:42 a.m., a single gavel strike in a packed courtroom. The 1993 estate process was officially ruled compromised. The judge's voice had been firm but devoid of drama. Based on the submission of authenticated documents, first-person testimony, and evidence of financial coercion, this court finds the original probate settlement legally invalid. We rule in favor of the plaintiff, Ms. Marianne Kelly. Cheers hadn't erupted, but a quiet electric gasp pulsed through the gallery. Diane, dressed in pale gray, looked like she'd stopped breathing mid-thought. Her lawyer whispered something frantically. It didn't matter. The ruling was on record. By 10:10, Diane's assets were frozen, pending investigation into both civil fraud and criminal perjury. Bank accounts, properties, even the trust fund she claimed had been for Olivia's college expenses, locked. At 10:32, Marianne was granted full legal rights to reclaim her portion of the estate, retroactively including interest and penalties. The second will, once singed and buried, was now the law. Her father's voice, captured on tape, confirmed by multiple sources, had spoken from beyond the grave. The courthouse security escorted Diane to the lobby. There, she broke. "No, this is ridiculous. This is political. This is elder manipulation," she shouted. But the marshal was already unfolding the cuffs. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for perjury, obstruction of justice, and intentional misrepresentation of probate records." Olivia stood at the top of the stairs, watching it all. Her hands trembled, but her eyes stayed fixed. When Diane was turned toward the doors, she twisted her neck and hissed one sentence over her shoulder. "This isn't over. You don't know everything." Marianne hadn't moved. She didn't need to. The silence said more. That night, she returned to the farmhouse, her farmhouse. The title was reinstated in her name. The land, now partially paved over, still held roots deeper than asphalt. She stood on the porch with Olivia, both holding mugs of tea. The air smelled of pine needles, wind, and the thin metallic promise of winter. "I was 12 the last time I stood here," Olivia said softly. "I was 42 the last time I had a key," Marianne replied. Inside, the kitchen still held ghost marks of hung frames, a dust-lined square where a toaster had sat, the cracked paint above the sink. And under the stairs, her father's study, still sealed. They left it untouched. Later that week, Marianne received a thick manila envelope hand-delivered by a court clerk. It bore the seal of Judge Whitmer's personal estate. Inside was a sealed letter, dated December 1994. Never mailed, but clearly intended for her. "Marianne, I should have done more. I should have said no. Diane had something on me. Photos, wire transfers, evidence of gambling debts I'd buried. Her husband orchestrated it. They cornered me. They made it clear. Sign the probate as is, or everything I cared about would implode. I'm sorry. I failed you. But this letter, this truth, I hope it buries the rest." A court seal, a judge's private confession, a final puzzle piece. Olivia read the letter twice, mouth parting slowly. "Diane didn't act alone," she whispered. Marianne exhaled, slow and long, like smoke rising from years of scorched memory. "No," she said. "She had help, and now I know exactly where to start digging." The steel roll-up door groaned like a coffin lid as Marianne turned the rust-bitten key and pulled it open. A stale gust of air met her face, thick with dust, mildew, and the faint bitterness of old paper. Olivia stood just behind her, flashlight cutting a narrow path into the dark. Metal shelves lined the back wall, stacked with warped banker boxes and labeled file crates. One box sat by itself, front and center, the tag faded but still legible. Kelly V. Whitmer, never filed. Marianne stared. "There it is," she whispered. Inside, folders were packed in tight, brittle yellowing sheets fastened with rusted clips. Olivia began sorting while Marianne flipped through the top layer. Her fingers landed on a folder marked Confession Draft, JW, December, 1994. She opened it with shaking hands. The letter was typed, but the signature line was blank. "To whom it may concern, I, Judge David Whitmer, confess that I was blackmailed in 1993 into ruling against Marianne Kelly's estate claims. The threats involved disclosure of gambling debts and photographs taken at an illegal private poker club in Reno, Nevada, funded by one Whitmer LLC Trust. The evidence was provided by Diane Kelly and her husband, James Riley." Marianne read the words twice before she could breathe. Her nails dug into the paper. He knew, and said nothing." Olivia reached into another folder. "Grandma." She held up a photocopy of a check, dated July 1993. The payer, James Riley. The recipient, Whitmer LLC Trust. Amount, $85,000. "Here's your motive," Olivia said, voice steady. "Here's your timeline." Another folder revealed transaction logs from an offshore account in the Caymans. Marianne skimmed them. The amounts were massive, wire after wire, months apart, all funneled through shell entities traced back to Riley. "He laundered the estate," Marianne said, her voice tight. "That's how they moved the money after the will was forged. They didn't just steal it, they washed it." In a separate envelope was a list of sealed probate cases Judge Whitmer had ruled on between 1992 and 1996, several bearing familiar last names from town. Olivia pieced it together out loud. They didn't just bury your case, they buried dozens. Anyone without a loud enough voice, enough money, or someone to fight for them. Gone. Marianne stared at the pile of evidence on the floor, heart pounding. The air felt thinner now, heavier. "We could take this to the state attorney," Olivia said, "or the DOJ." Marianne didn't answer immediately. She paced, her shoes crunched over spilled staples and yellowed corners. She looked down at the confession letter, then at the check, then at the burner email printout that had come with the key. "If we go public," she murmured, "we risk everything. Our safety, our peace. I'd be putting your name in the fire again." Olivia stepped forward and laid a hand on her grandmother's shoulder. "You didn't fight this hard just to make a point. You fought to uncover the truth. If we don't finish this, someone else's daughter ends up silent, too." Marianne looked at her granddaughter, face lit by the flashlight's warm beam, jaw set in defiance. She was no longer a girl hiding in her mother's shadow. She was a woman standing in the light. Marianne turned to the folder labeled "Sealed Correspondence, Not Admissible," and pulled out a single business card, "Gina Larrabee, News 10 Investigative Unit." She pulled out her phone, dialed, waited. "Gina, it's Marianne Kelly. I have one last story for you." A pause, then, "Marianne?" She took a breath. "And it ends in fire." The opening chords were soft. A piano trill, low and deliberate, followed by the host's voice, quiet but razor-edged. "This is Bloodlines, the Kelly Conspiracy, a story of inheritance, deception, and the women who refused to be buried." By 12:18 a.m., it had already racked up 50,000 streams. By dawn, it was front page on every major aggregator. In crisp detail, the episode laid out the rot: forged wills, a judge on the take, an offshore laundering network run by Diane's husband, and the slow suffocation of a woman who had once been the rightful heir to her family's legacy. The producers intercut Marianne's audio recordings with expert analysis, Ellison's redacted testimony, and excerpts from the video confession. Diane's voice, clipped and defensive from her press conferences, was contrasted with Olivia's, clear, furious, raw. By mid-morning, Twitter was a wildfire. We're Bloodlines podcast. Justice for Marianne. Reopen the files. Local representatives, once silent or skeptical, now demanded a county-wide audit of every probate file Judge Whitmer had touched between 1992 and 1996. Former families began speaking out. One woman recounted how her grandfather's will was mysteriously unlocatable after Whitmer presided over the hearing. Another found similarities in notary discrepancies. The courthouse that once dismissed Marianne's grief was now under siege from the very public it served. Back at her house, Marianne sat surrounded by boxes, not of evidence, but of letters. Handwritten, typed, emailed, printed, and folded in crooked stacks. Most came from women, grandmothers, daughters, estranged aunts, and widowed neighbors. Each letter thanked her, each one told of something eerily similar. "I lost my land to my brother's wife. My mom's will vanished too. I was told I was crazy when I asked questions." They hadn't just believed her. They had needed her. In Olivia's email, a new message blinked with bold letters. A foundation in Massachusetts had reviewed her university file and, after hearing her story on the podcast, offered her a full scholarship in legal ethics and advocacy. She stared at the screen, then turned it to her grandmother. "You said fight with facts, not fists," Olivia whispered. "Now I get to do that. For real." Meanwhile, Diane, once the neighborhood icon in pearl earrings and power suits, had become a ghost in a courthouse cell. Her bond hearing lasted all of 10 minutes. 4 felony indictments, 2 counts of fraud, 1 count of obstruction, and 1 of perjury. The judge called her a calculated risk to justice and a danger to the ongoing investigation. Bail was denied. The halls where she used to conduct charity meetings now echoed with reporters' boots and angry chants. "Reclaim what was stolen," and "She deserves her land back." And then came the invitation. It arrived in an ivory envelope embossed with navy foil. University of Pennsylvania, Center for Truth and Law guest lecturer, Marianne Kelly. Topic: Truth as Reclamation, Legacy, Injustice, and the Power of Exposure. She hesitated when she saw it, holding the envelope like it might bite her. Olivia nodded. "Say yes," she said. "You're not finished yet." So Marianne boarded the early train. Navy blouse buttoned to the collar, eyes trained on the passing landscapes like an archivist cataloging memories. In her lap rested her notes, a speech, crisp and edited, with the opening line underlined in pencil. "This isn't just about land, it's about the voices buried with it." The auditorium was full. Young faces, journalists, law professors. A few familiar figures in the back, former neighbors, a former schoolteacher, even a man who once sat on the zoning board that paved over her family's orchard. She took the stage with her usual quiet grace. No applause yet, just breathless expectation. Then she froze. Front row, 5th seat from the left. A woman with jet black hair streaked in silver. Hazel eyes. The same crooked left brow Diane had. She wasn't clapping. She wasn't blinking. She was just watching. And Marianne's breath caught because it wasn't just a face from the past. It was Diane's sister, the one who supposedly died in a car crash 20 years ago. She stood behind the podium, her fingers lightly brushing the edge of the oak lectern, gaze drifting over the sea of faces. Students with notebooks open, phones raised, brows furrowed in thought. And in the 3rd row, near the center aisle, Olivia, eyes glassy, hands clasped, mouth parted like she was holding her breath. It wasn't pride Marianne saw on her granddaughter's face. It was something deeper, reverence, relief, maybe even redemption. And then, like a shadow slipping sideways through time, the woman from the front row rose. Black coat, silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight knot, that crooked left brow. Diane's sister. Marianne stepped down from the stage, steady and unhurried, letting the students mill around her. A few asked for photos. Some wanted quotes for papers. Olivia stood back, watching as the woman approached. She didn't speak right away, just held out a small object between 2 fingers, a silver USB drive. "There's more you should know," the woman said quietly. Marianne stared at it. Her pulse ticked once, twice. Then she smiled with a calm that felt earned, not borrowed. "Later," she said, and slid the drive into the pocket of her purse like it was just another receipt. Outside, the air was cold and crisp. Olivia linked her arm through hers, her voice trembling but bold. "You didn't just save the land," she said. "You saved me." They didn't speak again until they reached the courthouse mural. It stretched high above the sidewalk, a vibrant mosaic of open mouths, weathered hands, and a singular woman standing tall in silhouette. Beneath it, scrawled in bold letters, "Let her speak." Marianne stood for a moment, taking it in. The wind tugged at her scarf. Her bones ached, but her chest felt weightless. Weeks passed. The farmhouse, once rotted with silence and weeds, buzzed now with life. The floors had been sanded, the roof repaired. A carved sign hung from the porch post. "The Kelly Center for Probate Justice, established, Isonazibon Yun." Each room had a purpose. A place for testimonials, a room for youth education, a quiet back office with Marianne's name on the door, where Olivia sometimes sat with her laptop, dreaming up the next fight. Marianne's role wasn't flashy. She greeted, she brewed coffee, she watched. But in that watching, she stitched back something that had been taken from her. Not just land, not just legacy, but voice. On a rare, quiet day, she stood in the farmhouse kitchen unpacking the last cardboard box, yellowed paperwork, a framed photo of her father, a ceramic apple from her first year of teaching. And, at the very bottom, her original will. She stared at the dated signature, the neat cursive of her own name, once left to gather dust in a locked drawer, while Diane rewrote the narrative. She walked to the table, sat down with a pen, and began signing a new one, line by line. This time the land and all its future were left to Olivia, and to the foundation they had built. She didn't pause when she reached the end, didn't tremble, just signed with the steadiness of someone who finally knew what was hers. That night, as dusk painted the coast in bruised purples and deep golds, she returned to her modest home near the water. The porch light buzzed softly, her wind chimes clinked in the breeze, and waiting at the door was a package, no return address, no markings, just brown paper, tightly wrapped. She picked it up. It was feather light,